national, subnational, regional, global level is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Bueno, la CIM tiene una agenda enorme en el tema de democracia y de liderazgos. El primer ámbito tiene que ver con la gobernanza electoral, para que esta gobernanza electoral responda a las necesidades con las que fue creada, y es buscar los espacios de redistribución del poder. Después hay un programa interamericano sobre liderazgo de las mujeres, donde generamos conocimiento y también tenemos cursos de capacitación. Hay un poderoso curso que ha llegado a más de 1000 mujeres con más de 15 ediciones, que es para candidatas electorales, en las cuales conversamos con ellas, pero también nos ponemos en una agenda de solidaridad y articulación y alianzas entre las mujeres, a pesar de las múltiples diferencias ideológicas o de partidos políticos. También hablamos de los temas de violencia política, porque no es lo mismo llegar que quedarse, y la violencia política es una forma de ejercicio de disciplinar a las mujeres para que vuelvan al mundo de lo privado y enfrentar la violencia, hacer buenas investigaciones, buenas leyes que permitan sancionar la violencia política. Es parte de las aspiraciones de la CIM en este programa de liderazgo de las mujeres. La aspiración histórica de las mujeres es estar en el mundo de lo público, que nuestro trabajo sea remunerado y que tenga un reconocimiento. COVID ha puesto en evidencia una profundización de las brechas existentes para el logro de este objetivo. Estas brechas existentes ahora dan cuenta de que podríamos tener un rezago de más de 2 décadas en el mundo laboral, que el cierre de brechas que se previó que podía tardar 100 años en cerrarse, ahora se habla de 135 años para cerrar la brecha entre los hombres y las mujeres. Entonces, nuestro objetivo es que miren el derecho de las mujeres al empoderamiento económico, que el statement "quédate en casa", que es un viejo conocido del patriarcado, no sea que nos quedemos en casa siempre, y que entendamos que la inserción de la mitad de la población, de este talento humano que tiene una serie de ventajas competitivas, es necesario para el crecimiento económico. De manera que la CIM está colocando esta realidad, está colocando las necesidades de las mujeres y está haciendo unas recomendaciones de rutas para poder cumplir con el derecho al empoderamiento económico y con el crecimiento económico que requieren nuestras empobrecidas economías en tiempos de COVID.
Esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos, no podemos ser neutrales.
more than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
The COVID-19 pandemic brought unprecedented challenges to our member states and the people we serve. In response, the OAS Secretariat for Integral Development adopted a three-pronged approach by 1. Adjusting our portfolio of existing projects, 2. Exploring new projects to meet emerging needs, and 3. Expanding multi-sectoral partnerships. The results achieved in 2020 demonstrate the resilience of our member states and the commitment of the OAS SETI to work with member states and partners towards our common goals in the development of our region. Our Network on Competitiveness launched the COVID-19 Ideas Accelerator, sharing 250 tools, health solutions, responses, and recovery plans. The Network for Labor Administration published a portfolio of responses from ministries of labor to COVID-19, sharing over 420 measures taken to protect workers, employment, and income. Likewise, the Inter-American Teacher Education Network series, Teaching STEM in Quarantine, provided 117,000 teachers with key tools to continue advancing STEM education during the pandemic. Through its network and platforms, the Inter-American Committee on Ports promoted international and national best practices, guidelines, protocols, and recommendations on COVID-19 safety measures and continuity of logistic operations. Initiatives such as the Education in Times of Change platform allowed us to meet urgent needs by offering timely tools on virtual education and a dedicated space for ministries to share strategies, actions, and solutions. Other programs such as the Row Fund stepped up, providing emergency grants to offset the challenges imposed on our students by the pandemic. SETI's partnerships are adding value to member states in the form of technical assistance, training, and access to tools and services. In partnership with leading private sector institutions, we offered micro, small, and medium enterprises access to online tools and training, increasing their visibility and participation in e-commerce, a key to their survival and growth in the pandemic and post-pandemic era. A new OAS SETI Facebook initiative provided 85,000 MSMEs across the region with capacity building opportunities and WhatsApp business tools to aid response, recovery, and resilience building. The Caribbean Small Business Development Center's program achieved real impact, supporting new businesses, expanding sales, and driving growth. A new network of Caribbean SPDCs will broaden the program's reach. The Inter-American Committee on Tourism, the CTOUR, convened ministerial-level policy dialogue in an urgent response to the impact of the pandemic on the hard-hit tourism and hospitality sectors. Policymakers and experts discussed biosanitary protocols, travel and visa facilitation, among other critical areas for the sector's recovery. Partnering with the George Washington University and the U.S. Bureau of Indian Affairs, we went ahead with the scheduled first Indigenous Tourism Forum of the Americas, pivoting to a virtual format and convening over 240 participants from indigenous communities, the private sector, and governments. SETI also integrated sustainable development practices in the COVID-19 response. The pandemic is a daily reminder of the links between water, health, sanitation, food security, and nutrition. We ensured the continuity of our water management projects in the Plata Basin and worked with governments and partners in the design of an investment portfolio valued at $90 million. Additionally, the Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas continued to share relevant best practices and responses to the pandemic on energy and air quality. These few examples indicate our collective impact. We cannot do this alone. It is now more urgent than ever to address the region's structural weaknesses, to recover from the health, economic, and social crises occasioned by the pandemic and prepare for future shocks. It is imperative that we work together as we risk losing recent development gains and seeing millions fall back into poverty. It is time for the region to redirect course and pursue a more sustainable, resilient, and equitable future for all. We are in this together.
But the resilience building agenda is too big for any one stakeholder to address acting alone, and simply bringing together stakeholders, whether at the national, subnational, regional, or global level, is not enough. Effective, focused, and sustained coordination among stakeholders is paramount to provide countries with integrated and comprehensive support.
The OAS, as a hemispheric forum and honest broker, must continue to facilitate this process while we work with member states towards the attainment of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. Cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships that include all actors strengthen us, enabling us to be more than the sum of our parts. We can and we must work together. The future of our region depends on it.
Thank you very much for your cooperation. Good morning, colleague, permanent representatives, alternates, distinguished panelists. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this second regular meeting of the Inter-American Council for Integral Development, CD, for 2025. I am advised by the Secretariat that we have the required quorum and that we may begin with the business of the day. We now move to item 1. I now submit for the consideration of this Council the draft order of business, document CD/OD-154/25, which was distributed by the Secretariat. If there are no objections, the draft order of business is approved. Approved. We now move to item 2. As we continue to explore the theme for this semester, building equitable and inclusive communities in the Americas, expanding access and opportunities for all, today's session will focus on an issue that is critical for achieving inclusive development: unlocking the socio-economic development potential of rural communities. The Secretariat distributed a concept note on this topic in preparation for our deliberations. As noted in the document, rural communities across Latin America and the Caribbean continue to face significant disparities in income, infrastructure, and access to essential services. While the region's rapid and widespread urbanization improved living standards for millions, its benefits have not been evenly distributed within countries, leaving many of our rural and remote communities underserved and besieged by challenges to economic growth. Without targeted policies, sound community-driven solutions, and investment, our rural population will continue to suffer the ill effects of poverty, limited economic opportunities, and vulnerabilities to climate change. Today's dialogue will allow us to explore solutions that promote rural inclusiveness, enhance productivity, and foster innovation and creativity to expand opportunities in rural communities. I encourage member states to share their experiences and good practices in both policy and programming so that we may collectively identify concrete actions geared towards bridging this divide, which is an obstacle common to us all. To begin our dialogue, I'm pleased to introduce our panel of experts who will speak about the work being undertaken throughout the region to spur rural development. Our first panelist. It is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Juan Sebastián Vergara, Chief Executive Officer, Art Hotels Ecuador. Mr. Vergara, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It is a pleasure to be here with you and to share you a beautiful model that through tourism has been created in Ecuador. I'm actually going to speak in Spanish because that's my native language. Let's start from that. The
program that we've created here in Ecuador is called Microemprendedores, and it's for micro business owners. Essentially, it's a program that involves cooperation where we create a business and a community. And the only way that we can do things and overcome and leave in the past this and share this culture, the legends and myths of our country with the world is through a collaborative system where we create circular economies. Next slide, please. And I will be speaking very briefly about sustainability. So sustainability has an economic, social, and environmental pillar. For us, if one of these three conditions is not met, then our sustainability roof will fall. We need our projects to be socially, environmentally, and economically viable. At the same time, this will create sustainability. We are very faithful to this with all of the communities where we work, and we tell them that if they depend on someone to give them financing, that is not sustainable. That is just philanthropy, and philanthropy is not sustainability. But philanthropy is a good thing. It can take us to a good place. But what happens when we have situations like COVID that arrive, when we have a global pandemic, when we face economic crises in our country, which can be very severe. We would all love to give philanthropy, but we don't always have the resources because people need a way to subsist. And so sustainability means creating environments where the same project can sustain and finance itself. That is, if we have a crisis, it will continue to survive because it is self-financing. So something that we've talked about with many people from different cultures and communities is that I want to work with you. I want to teach you how to fish, but I'm not going to give you fish. This is a concept that goes beyond being a neighbor. It means being a human being, creating something fantastic that's mutually beneficial, and that's extremely important. Here we see the micro-entrepreneurs. We see members of small communities, musicians, entrepreneurs from small businesses who don't necessarily have an educational background, but they are protecting their ancestral traditions and communities in Latin America, in this case in Ecuador. Often they are indigenous community members. And throughout Latin America and countries like Ecuador, we see that these are people who don't necessarily have an opportunity to live in economic comfort. Often they aren't able to do what impassions them and live comfortably. And so micro entrepreneurs change that. This is a model that's very much something that can be repeated. We were able to open the doors and start talking to the artisans, and our neighbors tell us that art and culture are interesting in this place or another place, and they're excited to show us things or different projects that are underway. So you see in the before picture, we sent some people to learn about the storytelling and the art. We taught them financing, and we then worked with them on their products and the goods that they were creating and how to negotiate and how they can make this into something professional. So after making the investment, people feel that they are ready. They have a certain expectation, and so we're able to send them clients, and this changes everything. It changes the entire dynamic. And here we see this man who worked as a mechanic, and his children didn't want to continue working in his shop, and now 3 of his 4 children are actually working for him because they were able to pair him with 5 Americans and giving him some workshops. And he said, okay, these people are teaching me $30 per people. One of his children said, wow, $150 for an hour of your time, you're charging just like a lawyer would. And so this really changes the entire dynamic. And so someone like Marco, who has 5 groups in tourism like this, which is not difficult, he has about 5 to 7 hours with all of the groups, and so he is now earning about $1,250, which is enough to support his family. Next slide, please. So here we have some examples, and this is a difficult model if you don't look at it in terms of sustainability and you don't believe in the power of collaboration. Of course, then things will be difficult. And so I use these services, I pay well, I charge an appropriate fee for the services that I'm providing, and then people are able to pay their providers well. People are willing to pay for an experience and experience the traditions and culture of a country. Thank you very much. That's all I had to share with you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vergara, for sharing your experience in promoting sustainable rural tourism in Ecuador as an engine for economic growth and community development.
Es mi placer, señor.
It's been a pleasure, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I now offer the floor to Ms. Tanya Liu Esoje, founder and president, We Uma Fusranan, Women's Farmers Cooperative, Suriname. I note that she was specially recognized by the AICA as a leader in rural development in the Americas for her work. On behalf of the CD, I congratulate you, ma'am, for this special recognition. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Can I have my presentation, please? Yes, thank you. Okay, good morning. You may go to the second slide immediately. Your Excellencies, esteemed guests, all protocols observed. It is an honor to speak to you today on the transformative work of Surifit and We Uma Fusranang, which means we, the women of Suriname, in advancing rural development in Suriname. Our mission is not only to produce high quality food products, but more importantly, to create sustainable economic opportunities for rural communities, particularly for women. But to better understand our mission, allow me to explain the why of what we're doing. We firmly believe that rural development is not just about agriculture, it's about changing lives. We are dedicated to breaking cycles of poverty, ensuring food security, and creating sustainable livelihoods for those who need them the most. I'm hearing an echo. Do you hear that as well?
No, we're not hearing an echo. I think it's being resolved. We apologize for that. Please
Thank
proceed.
you.
Thank you.
Excuse me,
Yes.
ma'am, before you continue, you can, and at the language interpretation menu, you can turn it back
Pardon?
to original audio. So,
Hello?
can you hear me?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you. Do you hear me?
I don't hear you.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, now I'm hearing.
Okay, so the technician was, what are his instructions, please? Okay, ma'am, if you would turn your audio back to original instead of interpretation, please. Maybe you're hearing the interpreters as well. So turn it back to
Yes, yes.
original.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Yes, we firmly believe that rural development is not just about agriculture, it's about changing lives. We're dedicated to breaking cycles of poverty, ensuring food security, and creating sustainable livelihoods for those who need them most. Our work is always aligned with the aspirations of the communities we work with. It is about empowering them, not just assisting them. We strive to ensure that our work is sustainable so that we are not dependent on continuous funding, rather build a system that thrives on its own. A key question we always ask ourselves is, who will champion this work when we move on to another village or another group of people? Our model ensures that local leaders take ownership, continuing the transformation long after our direct involvement ends. Moreover, by securing stable income sources for families, we create better opportunities for children from less fortunate households. Next slide, please. Our success stems from a strategic approach based on three key pillars. One is value chain strengthening, market development, and strategic partnership. We closely work with farmers, particularly women, to ensure reliable and quality supply of, for example, cassava and other staple crops, such as Tanya, you might know it as new cocoyam. Market development, we have established local and international distribution channels, ensuring that our products reach consumers in Suriname, the Caribbean, and Europe. And importantly, strategic partnership. We collaborate with agronomists, food technologists, and international development organizations such as ICA and IDB, COLEAD, etc., to enhance technical expertise and product development. We recognize that for our model to be truly effective, it must be sustainable and community driven. That means ensuring that our project aligned with the needs and values of the communities we work with. Local champions are empowered to lead the work beyond our direct involvement, and the economic impact extend beyond immediate participants, creating a ripple effect that benefits entire communities. What are the results that we conquered so far? Through our impact driven approach, we have empowered women in agriculture, provided sustainable incomes for farmers, and contributed to food security. And some key outcomes are economic independence. Over 50 women farmers and 20 factory workers now have a stable income, enabling them to support their families. Nutritional benefits: our cassava based baby food provides essential nutrition to children in remote areas. We are the first organization that produces baby food in a Caribbean country, which has the standard of Codex Alimentarius. Income growth for exports: our international success has created a ripple effect, increasing earnings for smallholder farmers. But we have challenges as well. Despite our progress, we still face several challenges that need urgent attention. Access to finance: sustainable growth requires investment in working capital. Infrastructure constraints: rural areas lack the necessary logistics and facilities to efficiently transport goods. And market penetration: awareness campaigns are crucial to educate consumers on the benefit of our honest and healthy products made in the Caribbean. We may proudly say that we went from small scale production to a fully operational processing facility that now has the highest food safety certification, the FSSC 22000. And our journey has been shaped by a commitment to quality and social impact. What started as a local initiative has now positioned Suriname as a key player in the cassava value chain in the region. Slide 5, please. I forgot to tell you the slides. Uh, Sorry, you can go on to the next one. Yes, policy and programmatic considerations. To maximize the impact of rural development projects, we recommend investment in agro-processing, supporting value-added production increases rural incomes. Gender inclusive policies prioritizing women in agribusiness initiatives. Infrastructure development, improving transportation and storage facilities to enhance supply chains efficiency. Financial mechanisms: access to grants and low interest loan for smallholder farmers and cooperative. Regional trade facilitation, reducing barriers for exporting processed agricultural goods. And for me, most importantly, scouting and supporting impact driven initiatives, actively identifying and supporting promising community driven initiatives will inspire others to take action, knowing they have the opportunity to be recognized and assisted. This will encourage innovation, commitment, and sustainable growth within rural communities. But you also have a role to play: networking, utilizations, and advocacy. Development agencies can play a critical role by using their networks to promote, prioritize, and advocate for the buying of products that directly impact rural communities. Slide 6, next slide, please. Our conclusion, Your Excellencies. We may conclude, and I like to emphasize, that rural development is about creating sustainable livelihoods, strengthening economies, and ensuring food security. Surifet and Wiuma Fusranang are living examples of how strategic investment in women, technology, and value chains can transform rural communities. Your support and advocacy are essential in these journeys and in scaling impact. By prioritizing investments in sustainable rural development, we can ensure that these communities continue to thrive long into the future. And although We love all men. We have a saying, we truly believe in the innate and exceptional power within women. We unlock this power in everything we do. And we have accepted we adapted a slogan which we have for 10 years now. If you educate a man, you've educated a person. If you educate or support a woman, you've educated and supported generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Liu Esoji, for highlighting the role of women in rural agricultural development and also the importance of cooperative farming models in fostering economic empowerment. We now move to our third panelist, Mr. Álvaro Ricardo Lemos Cardona, Director of the Asociación de Productores de Olopa, Apolo in Guatemala. Mr. Lemos Cardona, you have the floor, sir.
Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to share our experience from our region. Could I see my presentation? I'm going to talk to you about this model that we see in the Trifinio region, the Producers Association of Olopa, which is known as Apolo. In the Trifinio region, we see a convergence of 3 different nations, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And within that territory, we see 46 different municipalities, and there's this model of producers. It's a association, again, the Apollo Association that I've mentioned. The Apollo Association was founded in 2005 as an apolitical and areligious educational organization aimed at improving families' livelihood with an sustainable integral development plan, respecting the environment, and starting with getting quality products directly to market. We are made up of 232 women, 33 men, and we mostly produce coffee across 230 hectares of land. And what do? Well, on the production side and the environmental side, we have renewed 30% of our coffee production, and we are using environmentally friendly agricultural practices, and we cultivate things like bananas, citrus, avocado. You can see here how important the work of women is, and also the improvement of the quality of our own products. We're constantly striving for better. We also focus on agroforestry and regeneration. We have given classes in schools for young people who would like to dream of new realities within the coffee production sector. And we talk about the roast, we talk about the cultivation of coffee, we talk about young people's worries about the sector, and they need new opportunities, more opportunities to reduce migration that we're seeing in the region. So we talk about coffee from grain to the cup. And on the commercial side, what we have done is export towards the US and Canada. We're now members of the Coffee Providers platform on a digital level, and we've sold coffee to Switzerland, France. We are increasing our exports constantly, and we are working on our registered brand, Apollo, and working on it is certified by the FDA. We think that coffee is important. we need to be able to access different niches of the market. And we need to get women involved so that they can also contribute to the value chain. Our overseeing of the entire process allows for sustainability and financial sustainability, and we are able to make sure that the financial model works on behalf of all those involved and that our practices are sustainable. And why do we do this? We want to improve the well-being of the people involved in our business. So we work on social aspects like workshops, health days. We provide doctors, dentists, eye doctors, visits, and exams. And the women in our association work on artisanal crafts that they can then sell locally. We believe in local economy, and tourism is a very important part of our area because it creates new opportunities and it allows us to grow and develop economically. Our goals: we want to harness the socioeconomic power of rural communities, and to do so, we have to work on changing attitudes and increasing competitiveness. Rural residents can be both stewards of the environment and entrepreneurs. This is possible, but doing this means diversifying, being entrepreneurs, but also paying close attention to sustainability. So what path forward will we be taking? Our strategy for working towards our goals are continuing working with associations, with governments, private, public sector organizations so that we can truly open up opportunities to development for our rural communities. We focus on diversification, training, competitiveness, the value chain, financing, whether it be partial or total, medium and long term, and direct access to markets. And what I can say is that involving women in coffee production has improved our ability to specialize and also the quality of our product. And it has also created opportunities in this sector, or by creating those opportunities in this sector, we've seen an improvement in the social goals that we've identified for ourselves. Increasing coffee production while focusing on sustainability reduces our footprint, and we see less deforestation. And the regenerative forestry that we mentioned is very important because we want alternative practices to traditional agricultural practices. And this we rely on the contributions of all of our partners. They've been incredibly important for achieving our goals. We think that an entrepreneur is someone who dreams, but they need cooperation to achieve those dreams. Many thanks.
Mr. Lemus Cardona, for illustrating the impact of producer associations and rural cooperatives on strengthening small-scale agriculture and on accessing new markets while being mindful of the environment and of sustainability. Thank you. Our final speaker is Ms. Risa Joseph, Principal Consultant from Classroom to Community, St. Lucia. Ms. Joseph, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you immensely for this opportunity. My name is Raisa Joseph, and it's an honor to be here. Es un placer. The presentation, please. Thank you immensely. So today's presentation will focus on how do we appreciate the context the cultural practice and creative capacity of communities as we endeavor to ensure that there is equitable and inclusive community development in the Americas. Next slide, please. It's important for us to appreciate the fact that the urban-rural divide that we speak of in the Americas and in particular small island developing states represents historical continuities where particular areas within states receive consistent forms of investment, both infrastructural and otherwise, which allow for them to be points of takeoff and more developed than other spaces. And so in Caribbean states in particular, the majority of the land area which we see can be classified as rural, and this necessitates a broader understanding of not just rural urban disparities, we are classifying spaces, but also how national development takes place in small island developing states where the vision is not just for rural spaces to develop, but for national development to take place in a different frame. Next slide, please. Accordingly, we want to reframe looking at development from simply the dichotomy of urban and rural to see how national development can take place in a way that is more decentralized and equitable, and for allowing us to look more broadly at what actually is economic development and do our definitions actually allow us to see the opportunities that actually exist within rural communities and spaces so that they can actually develop. We also want to be able to acknowledge the fact that while we note that there have been some areas of development for urban spaces, that some of these economic gains are often reduced when we look at the higher costs of living that many individuals have experienced, particularly younger folk who would note while their income earning capacity is greater in urban spaces, so too is their cost of living in terms of rental costs, higher inflation rates in these particular zones. And so we need to examine not only what occurs within the rural spaces, but also the inequalities that might actually be taking place in urban spaces that might boast of more economic opportunities. And therefore, we must ask ourselves a critical question or some critical questions, such as what are the strategic advantages of a community? Do we want rural areas to replicate urban spaces, or should we leverage their unique cultural, social, and economic attributes? And some of the presenters who came before me would have looked at the importance of understanding your context, the benefits to be derived from particular spaces, because what we really want is a sustainable model of development. Next slide, please. Critically, we must note some of the challenges that are before us, and they're not insurmountable, but they must be addressed if we want to target creating greater inclusivity and holistic economic development for communities of various shapes and sizes. And predominantly, some of the challenges that are being faced are linked to access, particularly to things like road services. When we look at the terrain of some spaces and where rural communities are situated, poor road networks are really the barrier that limits connectivity. We also look at the telecommunications networks that exist within spaces that can impact not just rural communities, but also urban spaces to the point where more diversified hybrid forms of communication and opportunities are limited because of the kinds of service providers we actually have, and also the limitation in facilities to access these services and resources. So the broader network of governance systems surrounding access to amenities is a crucial part of our discussion today. We also want to speak of the absence of very often human-centered approaches to programming and the accessibility to resources. And by that, what I mean is very often programming, resources, training, educational opportunities are available, but they're placed in spaces that are far removed from the populations that they're trying to target, as opposed to adapting an approach that comes to the community to meet them where they are, to limit disadvantages. They are placed in areas that are closer to policymakers, and we must address this particular frame of mind when we think about development. And we also know that there is an underutilization of existing facilities. For instance, an ICT center that might have been set up for educational purposes might not be utilized for additional training when it can be retrofitted and repurposed to ensure that resources receive maximum use. And another aspect that we want to touch on that is hindering the growth of rural sectors and communities is a very high import dependency and foreign preference that is linked to a misunderstanding of what resources and assets actually exist in a community for its development. So take for instance, you might have the philosophy that is sold, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but within your community, there are locally produced goods that are of high quality, of importance to health and development and the economic well-being of individuals, but because of perceptions historically of what is good and what is not good, there is a leaning towards purchasing outside of the local community and stimulating growth and development. Next slide, please. There are opportunities for strengthening the networks that exist by creating greater standards and consequences with regulations and standards. There is the opportunity to adapt the use of current facilities and spaces such as human resource development centers and ITC centers for growth and development, training and retooling, and optimizing existing models of economic success using what is present within the community in traditional agrarian industries and financial institutions that provide fertile opportunity for not just community development, but for data analysis. When we realize, for instance, that every community has its own unique philosophy about economic development and wealth creation, we see the role of, for example, credit unions becoming a source or lender of financing to support local traditional means of economic viability. We need to see how do our models engage critically to adopt what exists in the communities to make stronger opportunities available. Next slide, please. And crucially, while it is we examine not just our context, the challenges and opportunities that exist, we must note some critical changes, areas of flux that must be in focus while we are planning around inclusive development. And these are the changing demographics of urban and rural spaces. Crucially, you are leaving an aged population behind within rural areas, while in the urban spaces you find a younger demographic moving into these spaces. We must be cognizant of the emigration and immigration patterns that are taking place within countries, the significance of remittances and diaspora support in strengthening these networks, and also education and generational knowledge sharing, not just in the traditional means by way of the school system, but by individuals sharing their knowledge and know-how in industries like agriculture, farming, and craft making. Next slide, please. So the aim must always be communities must be centered, partnered with, and engaged meaningfully. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph, for your valuable insights on expanding education and community-driven development in rural areas. I now open the floor for an interactive dialogue between member states and our panelists. Delegations are kindly asked to limit their questions or comments to 3 minutes. I recognize Costa Rica. Costa Rica, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to briefly introduce Alberto Lopez, who is the head of the ICT of Costa Rica on tourism, and he shared his vision of how tourism can be seen as a key driver of sustainable development, particularly for rural communities. He has led various initiatives of innovation that have changed the tourism landscape in Costa Rica and rural communities, all the while preserving the environment and cultural traditions. Don Alberto will talk about the challenges and opportunities that rural tourism present, along with the commitment of ICT Costa Rica with environmentally friendly practices, and we'd like to thank him for his participation and his willingness to share with us today. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Hola, muy buenos días.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Please let me know. Yes, we hear you. You have 3 minutes, briefly. Thank you.
Gracias, muy amable, muy.
Thank you. Very kind. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. It's a pleasure to participate from Costa Rica in this exercise. I'd like to greet the president, the chair of this committee, and the permanent members and delegates of other member states. Thank you for the honor that you have given us by allowing us to speak just a little bit about what rural tourism and community rural tourism means for our Central American company. Rural tourism in Costa Rica is productive, and it's based on offering small and medium-sized businesses products. More than 80% of the companies that work in the tourism sector in our country are made up of that size enterprises. And if we add micro enterprises, that's almost, that's about 86, 87%. So much of our tourism industry is made up of these smaller, medium, and micro enterprises. We see many of them in the Central Valley of Costa Rica, where most of the rural communities are located. And rural and community tourism offer different activities in rural spaces with the idea of giving tourists, both national and international tourists, the opportunity to enjoy different aspects of the area. Local culture, in a way that we celebrate it, food, culture, the history, the customs, the way we are, the way we live, our music, our dance, the natural world, and of course the ancestral practices of the indigenous people who have been here for centuries. And what we aim to do here is connect the essence of Costa Rica and our natural beauty with the desire of the tourist to enjoy it. And we see community tourism and rural tourism, they go hand in hand. But rural tourism offers services directly to individual people, individual entrepreneurs, and the community model groups together these different entrepreneurs in associations, conglomerates that might be a little bit larger, so that they can really leverage their collective power. The development of rural tourism in Costa Rica has had incredible benefits for our country, and I'd like to highlight just a few. First, it has generated wider democratization of the income that is generated by tourism and has brought new opportunities to thousands of Costa Ricans throughout the country. And it also creates jobs for local communities. There's sort of a domino effect. We've seen a diversification of the agricultural practices and in agro-industrial practices in order to support those activities, to support tourism. We also see a promotion of culture and history and traditions and food, music, dance, and all that serves to maintain those practices. They're deeper rooted in the communities, they're more present in our lives, and so it improves our lives, not just those of the tourists. So, and we also see the promotion of large chains, production chains. We are able to see protection increased for the natural local flora and fauna, and we also see an increase in the association of local entrepreneurs and groups. And then we've also seen, because of the rural nature, well, the impacts of this model are seen locally and in areas where there is more need. And so rural and community tourism really help to stimulate the creation of wealth and improve the well-being and the lives of the people living in those communities. And so our organization has aimed to improve the of the tourist offerings in that area, so that the programs are of higher quality, and so that everything that is involved in the product, the services, don't just speak to the needs of the tourist or the interests of the tourist, but also improve local livelihood. We also have there the opportunity to train, to educate 4 subsectors within this sector. So we've got travel agencies that work on itinerary and local plans, the food industry, hotels, and others. And all of that aims to keep this trend strong, long-term, with high quality standards. And this is all in line with the Costa Rican Institute of Tourism to promote tourism as in a holistic way to improve Costa Ricans' lives, maintaining a balance between social, economic, environmental, and cultural, as well as infrastructure-related variables. And I will close by saying that beyond the potential that these models have, there are also serious challenges, and we've probably shared them with many of other countries in the region. We need to make sure that that more people have opportunities to participate in this sector, in the supply chain, and that the resources generated are more equally shared. And this type of activity should always reflect the essence of Costa Rica and the beauty of our society and the warmth that defines who we are as Costa Ricans. And I'd like to end by thanking you so much for the space. I wish all of you every success in your respective projects and work. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Lopez Chavez. Thank you very much, Costa Rica. And with a reminder that this session is meant to be interactive between member states and the presenters, I now offer the floor to Dominica.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank first the panelists for the very progressive presentations reflecting diverse experiences. Once we start to focus on community, we become faced with the realities of families and households. Anyone who approaches this will be faced with a very sensitive and holistic reality of each family or household, one where you can't always divorce the cultural, religious, educational, or even the household realities from the economic. My question to the panelists would be, while I understand and appreciate the specific nature and rationale of each project and program, can you shed some light on what approaches you use to incorporate into your programs that sensitive and holistic nature of the household comprising those communities? Thanks.
Thank you, Dominica. I now offer the floor to the panelists for their response. Panelists, if you're interested, okay, I see Mr. Vergara. Mr. Vergara, please.
Thank you very much for your comments. I think that to answer your question, we need to have models based on accountability, and basically that entails communities also shouldering some responsibility for the community where they live. And so this means that we need to be responsible for the benefits that we have in all of our projects. And that's a very important step, because this is how we're able to build a culture that benefits the entire community. And so once this encompasses the entire community, it's a wonderful thing. They're able to work and see the benefit of that. For example, if they work in tourism, as Costa Rica also shared, they have a duty to bring more people into the program so that the programs grow and increase the tourism supply, and they can continue to develop along those lines. And so this is how we build accountability for every individual and their community. That is, we have to have control of the projects by the communities themselves, and that's how we start to educate and build that culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vergara. Ms. Raisa Joseph, you have the floor, please.
I think that's a significant question, and it comes back to who are you planning for and why. While From Classroom to Community does not work on a specific program, we cater to diverse audiences. It allows us to recognize the differences that exist within communities and the fact that it requires very often tailor-made solutions that we do not often think of, and there is often a one-size-fits-all approach for community development. And even within one country, you can find multiple groups and even a family, as you would have spoken about, diversities in that one grouping. So what is done is an analysis of, for example, how do you communicate with that group? Uh, as a Dominican, I am sure you perhaps would know that there is a Creole speaking audience in Dominica, as with other groups of people? How does language create or facilitate opportunities and understanding so that people can be reached in a way that is inclusive? In terms of youth policy development, how do communities who view themselves as marginalized or persons who have had records of being incarcerated now come into the mix and be catered for, acknowledging both their strengths and also the challenges that they may have? So it is really an assessment of who you serve, why you are serving them, what resources are available, and how you create a model and policy that is as beneficial and inclusive for all as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph. Do any of the other panelists wish to respond to this question, or shall we move on? Ms. Liu Asoye, I recognize you. You have the floor, ma'am.
Yes, thank you so much. Um, I like to address this question as following. So, in the example of us in Suriname, and I've mentioned it during my presentation, I think that the big mistake that we often make is that we decide in offices and give the uh, idea as if we know how this development should be enrolled. So I think the most important thing when trying to strengthen communities is ownership, ownership, ownership. We should not uh, think that we understand how we can change those lives. The people whose life we want to change needs to take ownership, and they need to express to us how and what they would like to see should be changed. Because, mind you, our needs are completely different from people in the interior, in the more remote areas. So, what we did is we are constantly including the people from the communities. We are constantly elaborating on the path. And maybe it's good to explain as well that what we are doing is really our livelihood. It's not a project. We enroll projects if we are, for example, being supported by a project through IDB, in technical cooperation or whatever. But mainly is that we this is our livelihood. This is how we earn our living. And in doing so, you're trying to um, do the best you can and strengthen every link of the value chain. I think that, and we all in our organization think that in whatever you do, um, strengthening of each and every link of the value chain is important. Let people know that they are being seen, heard, and felt, and let them know that they are important and that they take ownership for their own life. I think that that is the key element, and lead by example. That's the key element to have the success development in those communities.
Thank you, Mrs. Louis Soji. Mr. Cardona, would you like to make a response to this question, or shall we move on? I do not see Mr. Lemos Cardona. Therefore, I now offer the floor to Ecuador. Ecuador, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. Thank you to all the panelists for such interesting presentations. And my question is how projects have increased employment and well-being in the communities, and can they be replicated in other sectors of the economy? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ecuador. The floor is open to the panelists for their responses. Mr. Lemos Cardona, the floor is yours, please.
I believe that these projects create that added value in the deliverables that we're selling, and producers will have greater income as a result of that, and certainly that will increase their quality of life. However, we also need to look at that support from institutions that also helps with seeking out spaces for sales of these deliverables, and the sale, opening the market, financing in order to allow them to achieve their dreams. And so this isn't just a matter of producers having dreams. Of course, we all do, but to make that come true, we need a lot of cooperation and partnerships. This is where all of you play a very important role when it comes to making producers' dreams come true. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lemos Cardona. Do I see any other panelists responding to that question? Mr. Vergara, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Here in my own country, I'm delighted to answer your question that yes, indeed, the idea of these projects is to build a model that's very easy to replicate, and we see that the stakeholders are able to use the projects to create a business and help their communities. For example, it's easy to replicate because we have already replicated it in Quito, in the historic center, in Cuenca, in the historic center, as well as in rural areas of Cuenca, as well as in Tabalo, and in some of the rural areas such as San Miguel, Peguche, and La Compañía, and others. And we are also replicating it in cities such as Guayaquil, for example, with a project that we're opening there. What's more, we can replicate that in places such as the Galapagos Islands and the Amazon region. And so these are models that can be replicated because they're based on collaboration and building a business that has a supply chain that wins at every step. That is, these are circular economy businesses. This is extremely important, and the mission is how can we promote this model? How can we educate consumers? How can we educate people and markets? We can teach them to do business this way with sustainable coffee, with sustainable tourism, with projects that involve women in their communities. And so what they need is for the world to get to know them. And of course, that, of course, is something that's usually manageable, but all of you can play a huge role in helping us do that and sharing these best practices through magazines, associations, brochures, and other examples. This opens the door to more opportunity because these are models where when you have one or two success stories, people will follow and they will continue to repeat that. And so I am convinced that the panelists will share this with me. I'm delighted to share all of these models and see this replicated, because it's not for me, it's for what we're leaving to our children and our children's children and their children, so that we can leave the world intact and ensure that they are guardians of their traditions, of everything that makes us so rich in our culture in the Americas, so that the next generations are able to see and enjoy it. But the only way to make that happen is to ensure that these people traditionally marginalized by capitalism and the way the world works, to give them the opportunity to have a sustainable life based on our economy, so that the future generations to come can feel at ease as they pass on these traditions. So, of course, these models are easy to replicate, but what we all need is promotion. We need to educate people and share that this even exists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Vergara. Do I see any other panelists requesting the floor? I don't. And in that case, I now offer the floor to Barbados. Barbados, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is for any of the panelists. The climate crisis remains an existential threat to rural communities and to the vulnerable populations there, the elderly, the women, the children, and the disabled. My question is, how can we ensure that the underarching theme of resilience becomes a key enabling pillar so that no one is left behind?
Thank you, Barbados. I now offer the floor to the panelists. Mr. Lemos Cardona, you're recognized. Please proceed.
Bueno,
The idea of the systems that you use to grow coffee in this zone is very noble, and of course it does have an impact on climate change, and we have been driving agriculture and forestry systems that allow us to cover the ground and reduce high temperatures, for example, addressing excessive precipitation and looking at plant cover in order to ensure that we're dealing with the climate. We have also been using various plants that are very tolerant to or resistant to diseases caused by climate change, and we have adopted ecological practices that reduce the negative impact of climate change. This is what we're doing, and we have been multiplying these practices. We also need these programs to drive positive practices, and we have seen the results borne out. You can see that these steps are certainly feasible if you want to do them. Thank you very much.
Very much, Mr. Lemos Cardona. Are there any other panelists wishing to respond to this question? Yes, please proceed, Mrs. Liu-Sohier.
Yes, Madam Chair, I kindly request that you repeat the question to me so that I don't give the wrong answer. Just to be sure that
Okay, thank you. Barbados, please repeat the question. Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was, how can we ensure that the American theme of resilience becomes a key enabling pillar so that no one is left behind?
Okay, thank you so much. No, then it was correct. I think that inclusion is the key word in everything we do. We know that, for example, if we look at agriculture, and I love to give examples from agriculture because I think that it's very important for what is happening in the world in terms of food security. Looking at agriculture, we have a lot of experience from developing agencies like the ICA, COLEAD, etc., offering their knowledge to teach us smart agriculture. Our task, actually, as people working in the field and practicing, for example, agriculture, and knowing that the workforce in agriculture is aging, we have to look at innovative ways to engage the youth and to include them. And at the end of the day, I think that whenever we can demonstrate that you can earn, because at the end of the day that's what it's all about, is earning money to have a good life, actually. And whenever we can demonstrate that you can earn out of the activities that we are enrolling, and we include those youngsters within the programs or within our actions, um, I'm sure that they will follow, and that they will actually choose for it. And let me demonstrate it with an example. We are now working in the cassava value chain. I recently had some young people who came over and who saw the machineries and the processing facilities that we have established. We can now, as I think the only factory in the Caribbean at this moment, we can process 3 tons of cassava flour per day. And I can see immediately the transition when you have youngsters invited and demonstrate to them the innovation part and the other part, another hard part of agriculture. And that is when we notice that they are of interest. So, as I said, the keyword is inclusion. Hold people on their hands, guide them, and include them in the process and in the journey of excellence.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Miss Raisa Joseph, the floor is yours, please.
I think that's a very important question. And I would say, first off, that when we think about resilience, it shouldn't be an afterthought. I'm hearing a bit of an echo. It shouldn't be an afterthought, but a built-in part of planning. And if we say we want to build for resilience, it means that we're acknowledging that our communities have inherent vulnerabilities that must be targeted. And therefore, the systems at work must be able to have a conversation with various sectors. And I'll give you an example. In drafting one of the youth policies that recently came up for one of our partners, the conversation about youth, for example, who were incarcerated came up, and very often when we have dialogues and sessions, these are not the young people who are at the table. So when we think about being resilient, we're noting that we want to be able to allow all groups, all segments to be able to have an opportunity to live, have second chances and opportunities, and function in a way that includes them within the society. And so we must be able to have part of the conversation first and foremost, and have a philosophy first within our program that is environmentally conscious and recognizes the various vulnerabilities that exist already within our communities.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joseph. Shall we now move on? I will now like to pose a question, the following questions, to the named panelists in turn. Ms. Raisa Joseph, this question is for you, please. In your experience, what innovative education models have been most effective in including and empowering rural youth to unlock the socioeconomic potential of rural communities? Ms. Joseph, please.
One moment, I had a little disturbance in my. Can you just repeat the question again?
Certainly. In your experience, what innovative education models have been most effective in including and empowering rural youth to unlock the socio-economic potential of rural communities?
What has really assisted has been the utilization of community champions, persons from within the community who have utilized various models created from government structures who are seen as gatekeepers. They have been instrumental in creating avenues to guide young persons into new opportunities because we very often leave out the importance of a human element, an individual who someone can aspire to be like, who has a similar background, to be able to make the connection between not just the policy that is being proposed, but also the fact that they themselves are a living example. In St. Lucia, for instance, we have a deceased Emmanuel Belas, who was instrumental in sporting development as a teacher, as a mentor, and a coach. His programming facilitated the development of a number of outstanding sportsmen and women in the community, allowing them to go on to play for other regional teams and international teams by virtue of his coaching programs that not only looked at the success in terms of sporting achievement, but also the economic aspects tied and connected to sports. Apart from that, we also note that when institutions and programming acknowledge what already exists in the communities, what are the strengths of the communities, rather than recreating a model that is not compatible with the well-being of the society, what they normally do is to work with them. And I take, for example, sea moss cultivation in St. Lucia. The way that local farmers cultivate and rear um, Timos differs from other species in the region, and that has given them a unique edge in terms of how we produce and the quality of the goods that actually go out there. So it's important to know what works well within your community. Beyond that, even when we looked at, for instance, it was the development of certain GEF UNDP based projects, a lot of the communities that have done extremely well, it is because of tapping into voluntary practices that have already been in practice for a while in St. Lucia, for example, Kudme. I hope that my insights were clear enough.
Thank you very much, Ms. Joseph. They indeed were. Thank you. I would now like to pose this question to Ms. Tanya Liu Soje. This is your question, ma'am. What are the biggest barriers that women entrepreneurs face in becoming ready for export? What can governments do to help them to overcome these barriers?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for your question. Um, I think that it's not specifically barriers for women exporters. I think it is more so the barriers that we need to overcome for exports from out the Caribbean. And what is the most challenging part for us is that most uh, countries requires, for example, certification, and to be able to um, go through a certification project, a certification process requires a lot of money. For example, we have the food safety certification. And from that point on, whenever you have a certification or you're certified, you will not um, encounter many barriers anymore, because the first thing that is being asked by a buyer in another country is, what certifications do you have? And to give an example, a food safety certification costs 7,000 euros a year. So you can imagine that for the Caribbean, a small organization, or for a cottage industry processor, it will be very difficult um, to overcome that barrier. But I think that that is one of the challenges that can be tackled by organizations, development organizations, because usually we have to hire an accredited firm outside of our countries to do the audit for a certification. So these are actually the main barriers. As long as your product is certified, which means that you can keep up to certain standards, I think that there is a huge world out there for us to enter with our products.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Louise Soje. As our panelists have covered the points which we wanted to highlight during this meeting, I would now thank them all. I thank you, panelists, for your valuable contributions. I extend my sincere gratitude to you all for taking the time to participate in this important meeting and for sharing your valuable insights on the theme of unlocking the socio-economic potential of rural communities. Panelists, we deeply appreciate your contributions and look forward to our continued collaboration as we strive to build equitable and inclusive communities in the Americas by expanding access and opportunities for all. I thank you all very much for your time. I now invite member states, Mrs. Soye. I now invite member states to share their experiences, good practices, policies, and strategies for unlocking the socioeconomic development potential of rural communities. I urge delegations to limit their remarks to 5 minutes. I recognize Brazil. Ambassador, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Socioeconomic development in rural communities is one of the major priorities of the Brazilian government, and we thank all of the specialists this morning for their presentations, which enrich our discussion. In line with data from the FAO, integration with cities is fundamental for rural communities development, and this is done through public policies which aim at ensuring small producers' participation in urban supply as well as in the credit markets and strengthening the rights of land ownership. Our infrastructure is also crucial for this objective, and in Brazil, we underscore the Lights for Everyone program, which seeks to democratize the use and access of electric energy, as well as Wi-Fi Brazil, which ensures Wi-Fi access in remote areas. We have also been working to provide goods and services in rural communities and strengthening family agriculture, which has provided $15 billion by 2024, which is an increase of 4% compared to the prior year. And our national policy for technical assistance and rural extension is also aimed at increasing innovation and technology and bringing it to small rural producers. Chair, our innovative strategies in Brazil focus on the development of sustainable technology, the Brazilian companies in agriculture and fishing, biotechnology, use of land, as well as other technology. And the program for rural women's production also provides technical assistance and access to microcredits, and this is an innovation that has been noted with excellent results hitherto. To make the area attractive to sustainable investment, we prioritize initiatives that ensure rights to land ownership, gender equality, and incentivize sustainable agricultural practices. This includes measures underway and policies aimed at access to credit, and the SAF program to shed light on production investment while strengthening a program for food acquisition to the tune of $600,000 for local markets and family farming. The national program for school lunch, which also ensures a market for family farming. We also have tax incentives for differentiated financing for basic farming activities that have an impact on the food supply. And in order to ensure that these opportunities are taken advantage of, we need to work on technical training and capacity building, as well as access to technologies, beyond disseminating best practices for management and marketing products. Against this backdrop, we highlight the Pronatec program, which focuses on the social inclusion of rural people and young people, as well as professional training and technology. Chair, we have an accumulated memory in Brazil over many decades of projects aimed at international programs for socioeconomic development in rural communities. Some of those examples that we can cite that are success stories in the region include bilateral initiatives in the area of managing water resources with Argentina, Paraguay, Peru, the DR, and Paraguay, as well as vegetables and crops that are adapted to climate change with El Salvador, as well as programs for family farming with Bolivia. Considering the long list of South-South cooperation projects, we have been open to sharing our best practices and opportunities for cooperation with all countries of the region. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Brazil, and I recognize St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Thank you, Chair. Permanent representatives, alternates, permanent observers, staff at the Secretariat, guest speakers, good morning. The threat of food insecurity is ever present in our vulnerable nation of 150 square miles. Years of repeated weather events, excessive heat, drought, hurricanes, insufficient rainfall, together with external shocks such as supply chain issues, war-related food scarcity, and price increases due to sanctions are pushing food beyond the reach of the already vulnerable. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has suffered repeated weather events since 2010, such as drought, hurricanes, excessive heat, and flooding, affecting our recovery and crop yields. Our 2021 volcanic eruptions deposited a large volume of ash, cutting off access to farmlands, blanketing farms or becoming incorporated into the soil, affecting its fertility and crop yields. Due to evacuations, farmers were displaced and kept from their lands for months. Now, vegetables and some root crops are reportedly smaller prior to the eruptions. Madam Chair, the government's approach has recently shifted from providing income support for recovery to providing production tools to boost production and build resilience against food insecurity. The Emergency Action Plan to Combat Food Insecurity is an initiative which makes provisions to train farmers and fishermen and fisherwomen, distribute farm equipment, poultry and livestock, seeds and fertilizers, fish aggregating devices, and set up greenhouses, just to name a few. Another initiative is the Solidarity Fishing Fleet Expansion Program, which provides funding to purchase fishing vessels and offer training to our fishermen and fisherwomen. With the onset of increased private investments, such as in the hotel industry and the new seafood processing facility, our farmers and fishermen and fisherwomen are available to generate income by providing businesses with produce and seafood. Madam Chair, the OAS is poised to assist member states in overcoming obstacles that impede their socio-economic development potential. CooperaNet is the ideal platform to facilitate the degree of cooperation required. My delegation commends and applauds SETI for providing the space for dialogue so we can leverage opportunities available to create solutions to our development challenges. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I now recognize Mexico. Mexico, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My delegation thanks the interesting remarks from other delegations on this topic. In Mexico, Article 27 of the Constitution establishes that the state must develop the adequate conditions for rural development to guarantee employment and subsistence for the rural community. In addition, all activities in that sector must be carried out with an intercultural perspective and a gender perspective in order to promote inclusive, sustainable, equitable, and sustainable development. And in that context, our 2025-2030 plan, which has guided our work forward, is based on a Mexican humanist approach, a focus on rural communities and sustainable production with shared prosperity with the pillars of work and community. And we have 3 transversal centers: sustainable work, women's participation, and adaptation to the technology transformation, as well as indigenous participation. This is in line with the objective number 2 of the Sustainable Agenda for 2025-2030 and the SDGs, as well as rights of indigenous people and others working in rural areas, and other initiatives on an international scale on this matter. When it comes to investment and economic growth, we must be focused on well-being and sustainability. In Mexico, we believe that rural communities are those that have fewer than 2,500 inhabitants. In 2024, there were 1,800 of these communities located in Mexico, with about 27 million people. And according to our 2020 census, 21% of the population in Mexico is located in a rural area. And 21% of that population is women. We have to focus on these communities, reduce poverty, inequality, and promote integral development of that region. And with that aim, the Mexican government has promoted the strengthening of sovereignty and food systems as a guide for work in rural areas. We focus on those with greatest productive needs, especially in the south, southeast, and in arid and semi-arid areas. And also we promote the use of technology for productive innovation and improvement to add to the value chain, especially when it comes to coffee, forestry, chocolate, and others. There are also strategies implemented as we face vulnerabilities from climate change, all the while promoting mitigation and adaptation, as well as the sustainable use of water, soils, and protecting biodiversity in our activities. Mexico will continue to promote strategic priorities for production in favor of well-being, young people's future, sowing life, fertilizers for well-being, guarantees for prices, and fishing initiatives to improve the well-being and economic opportunities for young people and people living in rural communities. We are focusing on entrepreneurialism and social and productive sectors to transform the agricultural sector and promote gender equality and the empowerment of women. and rural communities so that they can better participate in the decision-making process at a national level. Rural communities highlight the initiatives that the President of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, has identified, and she committed as number 9 to have a sovereign, secure rural area, support for small and medium-sized bean producers, and support for those who, for seed producers, and sovereignty for food systems, and a special plan for the states of Campeche and Tabasco when it comes to the production of rice, meat, and milk. These plans will allow us to increase production of these products throughout the 1,800 municipalities that have high levels of poverty, and will benefit many producers between now and 2030. Mexico's plan, which includes the focus on Made in Mexico, is also in line with the 2025-2030 plan to achieve certain growth, social justice, and economic justice and opportunities. We saw data published recently that there are new guidelines for measuring well-being for small and medium-sized businesses, particularly those who cultivate chocolate, sugar, beans, grains, etc., and those who benefit of them. 28% must be women, and 48% must be found in municipalities with high levels of indigenous presence. In recognizing the rights of indigenous populations and their enduring legacy as necessary for sustainability in the future. Madam Chair, our rural communities in the future face serious challenges when it comes to equity, but our strategies focused on integral development that is also fair and justice, along with economic growth, will point us in the right direction. And we see an exchange of best practices and cooperation between the countries of the region as a effective way of building shared prosperity in the Americas. Thank you very much.
Obrigado. Passo a palavra à delegação do Panamá. Embaixadora, tem a palavra.
Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On behalf of Panama, I'd like to thank the panelists for their valuable contributions, and also thank the chair and the executive secretariat for this important session on taking advantage of the socioeconomic development of rural communities. This is a topic of particular importance for His Excellency President Jose Raul Molino and for all our region, since rural communities are fundamental pillars for identity and the economy. In order to efficiently involve rural areas, we need to see development in these important sectors with infrastructure that connects communities. And in that vein, our government has prioritized the construction of highways and other infrastructure in order to improve that condition in the country, creating jobs and also stimulating the economy. In addition, we have also implemented international cooperation initiatives in the agricultural sector, and a highlight is the Triangle Cooperation Initiative between Latin America and the Caribbean, which includes initiatives like the rehabilitation of degraded soils in Panama and eco-intelligent resource management in the province of La Herrera. We are committed to reducing the disparities between rural and urban populations, which requires innovative solutions that promote economic and social development. And in that vein, Panama has stimulated or promoted public-private partnerships that benefit rural communities in particular. And an example here is the collaboration between the Competitivity Center of the Western area of Panama, known as SECOM, where we have seen work plans for Chiriquí and Boca del Toro, looking for investment and the creation of jobs in those areas. In order to attract sustainable investment in rural areas, it is absolutely essential that we promote and implement regulatory and policies that will allow for that. The Panamanian government has committed to improving efficiency and competitiveness in the public sector in order to attract more foreign direct investment. That includes the strengthening of the banking sector and also the promotion of sectors with high productive potential. And there, it is important to support rural communities so that they can access socioeconomic development opportunities using and having available to them the tools necessary to do so. And in Panama, we've seen trainings and technical trainings implemented for local communities in, for example, the province of the western part of Panama. We've seen trainings for improving agricultural practices and production, and that has also fed national production, in guaranteeing all the while that imports do not affect local production. We have also implemented agricultural projects like the implementation of sustainable practices for improving competition and production for local farmers. And in conclusion, freeing up the potential of these rural communities requires a holistic approach with adequate infrastructure, equitable policies, correct reforms, and responsiveness to local rural communities. Panama reaffirms its commitment to all of these initiatives, and we are willing to work closely with the other member states of this organization to share experiences and promote a balanced, sustainable growth in our region. Thank you very much.
Muito obrigado. Passo a palavra.
Thank you. I'll pass the floor to Chile. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to extend our greetings and appreciation for all of the contributions and the preparatory work that went into this session on the part of CD. It's an honor for me to speak to you to talk about our experiences, our lessons learned when it comes to socioeconomic development in rural communities. We have a national plan that has been the backbone of this transformation. It focuses on infrastructure, training, and technology, and aiming at having rural communities better integrated with the national economy. We have seen a strengthening of competition for our producers, and that paves the way for a greater sustainability. In February, our Minister of Tourism, Nicolas Grado, presented our plan for an ambitious push for sustainable development in the archipelago to honor 200 years of Chileans' official existence. And this will be carried out between 2025 and 2027 with about 20 programs that will focus on fishing, production, agriculture, and prioritizing in its first phase the artisanal fishing in the area of Chiloé. There are other efforts that support that, and they might include a decree that created in 2023 a territorial integrity initiative, and the chair of the Republic and his team will study these sectors across all provinces and municipalities, examining current legislation and implementing mechanisms that will allow us to address rural and urban challenges identified, and the design, execution, and evaluation of public policies must reflect the realities on the ground. And we also have the Rural Competitivity Initiative, which will involve new technologies and entrepreneurial efforts to bring solutions to improve resiliency, exports, imports, and also diversify production, in allowing rural communities to insert themselves effectively in markets both on an international and national level. The strategic plan for the development of tourism is a partnership between the Ministry of Agriculture and other government bodies in Chile to better coordinate and participate on this effort. And the plan will prioritize good governance, innovation, and cooperatives to create favorable ecosystems to cooperative models and the Rural Women 2025-2026 within the body of the Development for Women's Empowerment will focus on rural populations and women entrepreneurs to increase their opportunities and their access to drivers of wealth. Through these various lines of work and the commercialization and coordination, will be able to increase production.
2022-2026, la cual es una iniciativa integral designada
aimed at transforming the Chilean agricultural sector, improving its competition, innovation, and sustainability, and it will focus on modernizing and digitalizing our imports and exports by promoting sustainable agricultural practices and strategies aimed at fighting climate change. And we will be promoting family farming and small producers through technical assistance. Regionally, we have shared many different experiences in Latin America and the Caribbean region, and that includes inclusive rural development. Our PPPs have promoted participation in multilateral projects, which has led to best practices in closing the territorial divide. And Chile, through its foreign policy, has continued to shoulder its commitment to sustainable development and equitable development as well. And our active participation on the international stage for food security has led to adaptation to climate change and technological innovation. And we have been active in coordinating with other stakeholders in this area, contributing to more resilient and fairer societies. Thank you very much, Chair.
Obrigado. Passo a palavra à delegação.
Thank you. I'll pass the floor to Peru.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Peru is thankful for the calling to order of this session of CD and the panelists who are joined us today that allowed us to look at one of the most intractable gaps in our region between rural and urban areas. Equitable development will not be possible without meeting the needs of rural communities where millions of people face structural challenges in accessing basic services and lack of opportunity. And that is why it's important to have an integral focus that promotes sustainable economic development and stability for these communities. In Peru's case, we have promoted policies to increase productivity in the rural sector, promoting tourism, community services, family farming, the development of sustainable value chains, and also the greater extension of basic services and access. FONCODES is a fund that has allowed us to improve the education and health sector in these more remote areas. And we have also focused on getting access for small farmers to national and international markets. And in that context, Peru reaffirms its commitment to social and economic justice and equality of opportunities using the cooperative mechanisms within CD like Cooperanet. I think that we can share solutions, best practices, and shared solutions that will allow for greater sustainable opportunities throughout the region.
A palavra à delegação da Bolívia.
Thank you. Bolivia, you have the floor. Madam Chair, distinguished member states, thank you. It is an honor for the plurinational state of Bolivia to participate in this session of the Inter-American Council on Integral Development, focused on the urgent need to reduce inequalities that affect rural communities in our region. We're thankful for your leadership in this vein and the clear support of CD's aim to promote equitable, sustainable development. And I also thank the panelists who joined us today. Mr. Chair, the normative framework of Bolivia holistically backs its rural communities. We have a new political constitution approved in 2009, and it establishes the right for rural communities to have access to systems and the economy as well as autonomy. And our Constitution defines the economy, the national economy, as being a pillar of social development. In the same line, it also indicates that the state has to promote fishing and agricultural practices that are sustainable, guarantee access to rural communities to technology, financing, and lands. And that legal framework has allowed for the implementation of policies aimed at reducing territorial inequalities and promoting access to productive resources. And in that line, the rural communities are absolutely essential to our identity. Despite these gaps, we are aiming our policies at improving lives for people living in rural communities, prioritizing infrastructure, technology, education, and health services. One of the fundamental pillars of our strategy has been investment in productive infrastructure and social infrastructure. We have a program called Empoderar, which is implemented by the Rural Development Department of the government. And we've there been able to see programs that strengthen the ability of small producers and farmers to improve their production and also gain access to markets. And that program has benefited many communities, increased their productivity and also quality of life, particularly rural women. Mr. Chair, in September of 2023, our national government, through that program and the Program for Innovation and Resilience, invested hundreds of millions of dollars to advantage thousands of families living in rural areas to improve their productive capacity and improve infrastructure in their context, improve access for small-scale producers to markets, and contribute to sustainability in the face of climate change. The resources are distributed in three ways: 100,000 for vulnerable communities, 100,000 for organizations of small producers who are looking to innovate their productive activities, and the rest will go towards supporting productive activities, bridges, infrastructure. And these initiatives reflect the commitment on the part of Bolivia to guarantee food safety and the sustainability of rural communities. Mr. Chair, our collective action is absolutely essential for rural development, and in that line, our government has promoted a digital transformation in the country through expanding connectivity to rural areas. In November of 2024, it was announced that we would have a fiber optic installation project that would be seen in all main municipalities, which would affect hundreds of thousands of Bolivians. And through that national program of telecommunications and social inclusion, we saw 58,000 Bolivians affected by a new fiber to the home program, which will allow high-speed internet access to 116,000 communities. And this will also include access to health services, and will promote sustainable access in the country.
Chair, in Bolivia, our PPPs have demonstrated that they are effective for integration of rural communities and development, as well as for the national market. And one highlight here is the example of rural partnerships. And this initiative is from the government and with support from World Bank, with technical assistance from the FAO, and it seeks to connect small-scale rural producers with associations and other partnerships, and it has promoted sustainable business plans with investments and risks that are shared between the public and private sectors to promote profitability in the agricultural sector in our country. Chair, our country reiterates its commitment to regional cooperation to reduce inequalities among our territories while strengthening our rural development. We staunchly believe in the potential of PPPs and the exchange of best practices, which is key to building more resilient rural communities that are better integrated to national and regional development. We call on member states to continue working on public policies that are innovative to promote equality and inclusion in our communities. We believe that collaboration within the OAS is a key component of achieving these objectives and ensuring that economic growth benefits all of us, but without regard for our geographical location. And thank you very much for the opportunity to share our experiences. And we reiterate our commitment to the principles of the CD. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bolivia. I now offer the floor to Guatemala.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. My delegation would like to thank you for convening today's meeting, and also thank you very much for the presentations and experiences that were shared by the panel. Rural communities in our region have an immense potential in areas such as agricultural production, sustainable tourism, and local entrepreneurship, as well as environmental conservation. Yet, this potential continues to often lag behind due to historic barriers that have perpetrated poverty and marginalization in these communities. In the face of this challenging situation, our government has a plan for 2024-2028 to prioritize development, territorial inclusion, and strengthening our rural communities. We recognize their key role in growth and well-being for the entire country. In order to support these objectives, we have regulations such as the National Policy on Urban and Rural Development and the National Policy for Territorial Governing. We also have a national plan for development known as Khartoum, that is Our Guatemala 2032. This is a roadmap for implementing the 2030 SDGs. And we also have our National Council for Rural and Urban Development, CONADUL, which plays a key role in coordination and drafting policies for development. It facilitates active participation from our population in these processes. Chair. In order to achieve effective integration in key sectors, it's essential for policies to focus on coordination between central and local governments in sustainable investment in infrastructure as well as basic services. This is based on key pillars such as healthcare and food. Particularly during the 2010s, this was a policy in my country, and it included programs aimed at promoting breastfeeding, eradicating malnutrition, detecting and addressing moderate acute malnutrition, as well as providing support for communities, families, and institutions. Education, training, and capacity building. Technical business training, particularly for young people and women, is fundamental to building opportunities for employment and driving the local economy. It's imperative for us to expand access to high-quality education at all levels, particularly with a comprehensive approach from early childhood. And with that aim, we have community centers for child development throughout Guatemala. In addition to infrastructure and connectivity for inclusion, improving infrastructure and roads is vital to connect rural communities with national and international markets. This opens up new trade opportunities and at the same time ensures universal access to basic services such as drinking water and energy. This is fundamental to improving quality of life and creating a business-friendly environment. Productive development and access to markets, strengthening agricultural and fishing production through sustainable development to improve productivity and reducing the environmental impact is key. And that's why we need to promote strengthening rural cooperatives and associations that promote the sale of products and access to better prices. Economic development, including community tourism and rural manufacturing, are great opportunities for rural communities. And with these approaches, we seek to empower rural communities in Guatemala, not only as beneficiaries, but also as active stakeholders in their own development, thereby contributing to well-being and progress in our entire country. Chair, hemispheric cooperation is key to driving strategic policies in rural development and ensures that communities have the necessary tools to prosper and contribute to sustainable growth in our countries. In this sense, we greatly value the initiatives that have been made available to us, and we underscore this platform CooperaNet, which facilitates the exchange of best practices and various options for cooperation to enrich our joint efforts. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Guatemala.
Thank you very much, Guatemala. I now give the floor to Haiti, please.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much, Chair. My delegation would like to salute you and take this opportunity to congratulate all of the panelists for their enriching presentations. And it's an honor for me to take the floor today on behalf of Haiti on a subject of capital importance, that's socioeconomic development in rural communities. In our countries, in the Americas, this is the beating heart of our economy's culture and our resilience. Therefore, but far too often, they are marginalized and exploited. And in Haiti, the rural population represents about half of our country, and they drive our agricultural production, but they face structural challenges of the highest scale. They have limited infrastructure, economic opportunities are restricted, and acute vulnerability due to climate change. According to World Bank data, farming, forestry, and fishing are about 20% of our GDP in Haiti and about half of our employment. However, agricultural production is seriously hampered by lack of access to credit as well and technology, as well as poor quality irrigation and roads. Harvests often are wasted due to a lack of storage and ability to transform it into something else. And we also face endemic poverty. And in 2010, 88% of our rural inhabitants lived under the poverty threshold. And we have seen rapid urbanization that has led to an exodus from rural communities to cities. And often cities are unable to cope with the human migration flow. This is very complex, but seeking irrigation channels today is a major opportunity for socioeconomic development in Haiti's rural populations, particularly in the northeast of the country. By facilitating access to irrigation water, this project allows us to improve productivity in farming and reducing farmers' dependence on irregular precipitation while improving their yields. We see the financial and logistic challenges, and this will improve local food security as well as lead to greater economic opportunities for farmers and merchants, thus driving the rural economy. We also see that we have many different initiatives underway to improve socioeconomic development in rural areas in collaboration with international partners and international and local organizations. We recognize the crucial role played by farming, and thus the government has implemented projects aimed at improving productivity in the agricultural regions. With support from the World Bank, the infrastructure for irrigation and fertilizing has been restored, and we see different schools created to teach farmers modern techniques. Our development strategy has been adopted since the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, and we seek to raise our development while ensuring access to basic services throughout the territory, including in rural areas. With the French Development Agency, AFD, we have seen efforts put forth in order to strengthen rural people's ability to act, with an aim of ensuring that groups of rural people and citizens are independent in their economic and environmental development in these regions. And the initiative includes technical training, capacity building, organization, and sustainable agricultural practices. It's urgent for us to step up our decentralization process on behalf of socioeconomic development. Decision power and infrastructure are often highly concentrated in the capital, so it's imperative for us to promote the transfer of technology and resources to other regions so that they can drive their own development. Collectivities and local governments, independence, access to basic services, improving roads are all key components to ensuring full success of this decentralization plan. Chair, despite the efforts put forth by our government, the challenges persist, and we have heard the tragedy in Haiti and its devastating impact on socioeconomic development in rural areas, exacerbating poverty and putting a stop to any attempt at improving living conditions. And the presence of these gangs is a persistent challenge which halts farmers' ability to get access to the tools that they need and hampers production of food, and farmers are victims of violence. They often abandon their land, which accentuates the food security crisis. And according to the WFP, 3,000 hectares of arable land were abandoned in 2018 to 2020, and we see a drop of 47% of land that's actually being farmed in just 1 year. And the Port-au-Prince airport has also led to an aggravation of shortage of supplies, rising prices, less fertilizer, and technology. We need to combine investment in infrastructure while supporting agriculture, protecting the environment, and strengthening capacities in our institutions. This is essential if we're going to improve the potential of our rural communities and ensure sustainable development. Our country's prosperity depends on the rural community, and they cannot remain marginalized. We need to guarantee a more inclusive, fair, and sustainable future for our entire society. Haiti is ready to collaborate with member states and the OAS to build together a dynamic and prosperous rural community. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Haiti. I now offer the floor to Canada.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, thank you to the panelists for their excellent and very important presentations. Indeed, the rural community of our continent often faces challenges and dropping prices, particularly in the face of climate change, and we have a lack of development in our infrastructure. Often this leads to a hampering of people's fundamental rights, and we face many challenges for these populations. Thus, we in Canada have been working with rural and urban populations by investing in sustainable development projects.
We believe that agriculture is a fundamental sector in which development programming should focus, as it represents one of the top employment sectors for rural communities. Canada is exploring the development of smart agriculture as a way to empower local farmers by supporting their access to new technologies and innovative practices. One good example is a Canada-funded project called Telegan, Sustainability and Innovation in Livestock, in partnership with the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. This project aims to improve the autonomy, resilience, and equity among cattle-raising families in Mexico and Guatemala, with a focus on women, youth, and indigenous groups. This project offers access and capacity building sessions for the use of remote sensing and satellite monitoring to help cattle-raising families to monitor the health and quality of vegetation cover, identify early signs of climate risk such as drought and floods, detect water sources and assess their availability, and better manage their land and natural resources to maximize productivity. To date, the project has supported several rural communities in accessing, learning about, and using satellite imagery to better manage their land, maximize their productivity, and therefore improve their resilience towards climate change. Canada will continue to support efforts to unlock the socioeconomic development potential of rural communities in our hemisphere. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Canada. I now offer the floor to the delegation of Colombia.
Thank you very much, Chair. Colombia would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the panelists who we have heard for their very interesting presentations. And we would also like to emphasize that rural-urban integration is key for our sustainable development. That is why our government is promoting working from the economic, social, and cultural dynamics of our territory with interaction between rural and urban areas at the forefront. This gap is undesirable, and we need to work to support rural inhabitants and provide them with natural, as well as supporting natural resources. And interaction between rural and urban areas means that we need to work with raw materials becoming the main financiers of innovative environmental sustainability projects, and this is a commitment that we all share. Against that backdrop, addressing existing inequalities has led to activities aimed at reducing those gaps and improving quality of life, such as rural reserve zones aimed at promoting more sustainable production, promoting agroecology and sustainable agricultural products based on ancestral knowledge, and coordinated with fishing and forestry, working directly and with intermediaries to ensure rural deliverables are accessible, as well as working on the infrastructure so that rural farmers have income and cities receive accessible, fresh deliverables. We have been working to ensure digital access with cities and in rural environments through digital cooperation. Our economy has been moving forward through regulatory and political reform, and we have been promoting sustainable investment in rural areas as well as part of this. It's worth noting that our national development plan aims at rural reform in order to democratize the use of the land, as well as territorial organization and water, as well as conservation of various strategic systems, cultural and archaeological heritage. This all aims at improving conditions of life for rural and urban inhabitants. Based on this legal framework, we have implemented strengthening of our land fund with redistribution of land equitably and focusing on special sectors, building an agrarian constitution in order to quickly and effectively resolve land disputes, restructuring financing and credit by developing various financial and subsidiary vehicles to promote investment in rural zones. And all of these tools are aimed at ensuring that rural communities are able to reduce their inequality compared to urban communities and promote their sustainable development with a special focus on quality of life so that every individual is able to build the conditions necessary for true sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colombia. I now offer the floor to Paraguay.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the first time that we are taking the floor during this period, and so we express our support and our willingness, as well as our desire to see you achieve most success. And we also thank you for including this topic on today's agenda. It's very important for rural economies to be considered, and we also need to look at the particular sources of tension and needs. Thank you very much to all the panelists for their interventions as well. Our government has placed a special focus on programs that lead to a high level of impact in improving infrastructure and access to essential services in these zones, particularly negotiation and financing for road projects have been a priority here, and they aim at improving the roads and transportation of deliverables, as well as strengthening access to education, healthcare, and trade. They thus promote more dynamic and resilient local economies. At the same time, we have driven key initiatives aimed at ensuring access to drinking water in rural communities and indigenous communities as well. In this sense, we have provided assistance to various departments around our country through the improvement of our water supply systems. On the other hand, financial inclusion has been a priority to strengthening production capacities for small-scale farmers and micro-entrepreneurs in rural zones. Through agricultural and rehabilitation credit, we have provided loans to over 27,000 families over the last year. This allows them to adopt new technology and ensure access to their products, particularly in the farming sector and SMEs. These initiatives reflect our commitment to inclusive and sustainable development in which rural communities not only access essential services and infrastructure, but they actually find real opportunities for economic growth and social well-being. Finally, we urge the OAS, in particular this Council and the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development, to continue to coordinating their efforts aimed at protecting rights and addressing needs, particularly from rural communities in our populations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paraguay. If there are no further comments, I propose that CD express its gratitude to our invited experts for their valuable contributions. I further propose that the Secretariat produce a summary of the cooperation opportunities presented at today's meeting, and that they assist member states wishing to share their cooperation offers and needs through the CooperaNet platform. There are no objections. It is so decided. I thank all delegates for your valuable contributions and comments, of which the Secretariat has taken due note. We now move to item 3, updates on CD ministerial processes. We will receive updates on key sectoral ministerial processes reflecting the continued collaboration with member states and progress made across various development areas within the OAS development pillar. To begin, I am pleased to invite Peru, as chair of the process, to present the report on the 7th meeting of ministers and high authorities of science and technology, REMSIT 7, held on December 12th and 13th in 2024. Peru.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am delighted to ask the Secretariat to please share the video that we recorded with the chair of REMSIT in CONCITEC in Peru, and also chair of the Inter-American Commission on Science and Technology, COMSIT. Dr. Sixto Sanchez, who as chair of the 7th REMSIT, held on December 12th and 13th, 2024, presented a report that was clear and detailed as it reflected the main advancements, conclusions, and commitments established during that meeting. I would ask the Secretary to please share the video. Thank you very much. Dear authorities, delegates, member states of the Organization of American States, I'm delighted to inform all of you that the 7th meeting of high ministers and high authorities of science and technology held on December 12th and 13th, 2024 in Washington, D.C. And the meeting had participation from over 100 leaders and specialists from areas of science, technology, innovation, and AI, from the public and private sectors, as well as research centers, industry chambers, and NGOs that work with the OAS in the framework of the Inter-American Commission of Science and Technology, COMSIT. At this meeting, we adopted the declaration toward development and safe deployment and trustworthy deployment of AI in the Americas, the importance of governance, regulation, and institutional frameworks. The meeting was led by myself, as I was elected as chair of COMSIT for the 2025-2027 cycle. Unanimously, the vice chair of COMSIT was under Paula Guantes from the Ministry of Science and Innovation and Telecoms from Costa Rica, and the Secretary of State of Science and Technology from Honduras, Dr. Walter Castillo. At this occasion, we addressed critical topics related to development and the safe and trustworthy deployment of AI in the Americas, in particular, the importance of frameworks for governance, regulatory framework, and institutional frameworks as well. And other important topics we discussed included intersectoral activities and dialogue on AI in the area of development and collaboration with other pillars of the OAS, such as security, democracy, and human rights. Dialogue and collaboration with the private sector, strengthening institutional capacities and skills in the area of AI in the Americas, and accelerating regional collaboration for the research and development of AI. The main results reflected in the declaration and plan of action that were adopted include: 1, recognizing that all areas of society, including the 4 pillars of the OAS, that is, comprehensive development, democracy, and human rights development, are all impacted by the swift pace of development of technology such as AI. And 2, the potential of AI to create new employment and accelerate progress in development, improve productivity, and provide innovative solutions to address development challenges as well. We also heard concern due to the associated risks of the use of AI and the impact that this can have on certain professions, which may disappear or be greatly impacted as these new technologies are adopted. Similarly, the ministers and high-level authorities agreed to implement an inter-American agenda for the development, deployment, and governance of AI to promote innovation, respect, protection, and promotion of human rights while driving integral development to improve the quality of life for our citizens in the region.
In terms of the governance mechanisms for AI, we agreed on the following: sharing information for improving frameworks and regulatory frameworks in order to create a shared baseline for the use of AI in the Americas, and developing model governance frameworks in order to be able to meet challenges that are presented by AI, with methods that might be able to be implemented and adapted by each country according to its national context and interests. When it comes to the dialogue with the private sector and other key stakeholders, we agreed that we would convene multi-sectorial dialogue roundtables to talk about key areas like governance, ethics, human rights, economic development, and safety related to AI in order to debate and align our foci when it comes to the use of AI across all sectors. And also to facilitate dialogue with industry leaders, the private sector, civil society organizations who are also carrying out research on AI, and to promote PPPs in order to promote research and development of technologies related to AI. When it comes to technical competencies and capacities related to AI, we agreed on the following: to develop programs to strengthen technical competencies and governance competencies related to AI for those who make political decisions in the face of identified challenges, implement capacity strengthening projects on key areas related to AI, related to technical development and political development of member states of the Organization of American States in areas such as methodology, IP, reduction of risks associated with AI, etc. We also want to increase technological literacy and access to information when it comes to AI amongst our populations, and also widen the opportunities for classes available to actors in academia, focusing on capacity and skill building related to AI. When it comes to the Centers for Excellence of identified technological transformations, we have the following foci: strengthening and widening the network of Centers of Excellence for Technological Transformers of the OAS, focusing on collaboration and advancing AI in sectors that are at the forefront. Also, to urge Centers of Excellence to carry out in research that will be able to inform policy makers, leaders in the private sector, and communities throughout the Americas, and also be able to offer practical solutions to common challenges faced by our communities and countries. When it comes to cooperation and coordination with other organizations and partners, we agreed to request that SETI coordinate with other regional organizations, the Inter-American Development Bank and others, to develop initiatives focused on AI together with the OAS, so that we can better aim resources, synergies, and better align our coordinated efforts. So then within COMCIT, we have two working groups. The first focuses on governance models, regulatory and institutional frameworks on AI. The second will focus on the framework for regional cooperation and collaboration for the development and deployment of safe, protected, and trustworthy AI. Another activity that we want to highlight was the ceremony for awarding the Science, Technology, and Innovation Prize to the winners of the region. There were 7 of the most important scientists and innovators from Barbados, Chile, Mexico, Uruguay, the United States, and other countries. They were recognized for their work in the medical field, in promoting sustainable agriculture, and other areas. The recognition highlighted their academic success, their contribution to science and innovation as drivers for regional cooperation, and their dedication to the fundamental pillars of development, all of which promoted governance on AI issues. The U.S. Department of State and the Organization of American States had a press conference to highlight the goals and the importance of this particular project. And to wrap up, I am happy to announce that as a next step, we are calling a COMCIT authorities meeting in March of 2025 in order to accept the working plan of COMCIT 2025-2027 in order to implement the mandates and actions set out in the declaration and plan of action approved in the 7th REMCIT. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you at the end of next month. Together, we will be laying the groundwork for successful AI deployment with respect to human rights, sustainable development, and we hope to continue moving forward with renewed commitment to AI in the Americas as a pillar of development, progress, and well-being for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sixto Sanchez, and to the delegation of Peru. We express gratitude for this comprehensive report and for your leadership in advancing science, technology, and innovation throughout the region. The mandates and recommendations from this meeting will serve as valuable input for our work to strengthen cooperation in this area. We now move to the Inter-American Committee on Ports. I invite the delegation of Uruguay as first vice chair to present the outcomes of the 25th meeting of the Inter-American Committee on Ports Executive Board, CECIP, held on February 14th, 2025. Uruguay, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to read the executive summary from the 25th meeting of the Inter-American Committee on Ports Executive Board. Uruguay, as first vice chair of the executive board and as a representative of INP, had the honor of hosting the 25th meeting, which was held virtually on February 14th, 2025. This meeting had participation from 10 member states, which make up CECIP, represented by port authorities on a national level from Argentina, Barbados, Colombia, United States, Guatemala, Mexico, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, and Uruguay. Within the Huracan Work Plan 2025-2026, during the meeting, we approved the following activities medium term, June to December 2024. Barbados was chair. For the technical consultation for environmental protection, we saw Peru. For the chair of the airports, ports, and air bridges, Argentina. For the consultative committee on logistics, innovation, and competition, Mexico. For chair of consultative committee on port safety, Barbados. For the chair of the consultative committee on regulations, Guatemala. For the chairmanship of the consultative committee on relationships between cities and ports and general quality, Panama. For the activities of the CEIP, Jorge Duan from the Secretariat of the CEIP, and the financial report from the CEIP and the 7C will be from Jorge Aduan, also from the CEIP. Additionally, and as a response to the request of Barbados as the chair of the CEIP, we saw a request for an associated member, Latin American Advisory Lawyers, which is a law firm, to take actions to avoid misinterpretations. And so we approved an adjustment to the rates charged in ports. So it will be $8,000 yearly. That will be voluntary in 2025 and then obligatory as of 2026. And during the meeting, Uruguay was willing to be the host of the 26th meeting virtually in April of 2026. And it's important to note here that Barbados reiterated its willingness to be the host of the regular session of the CECIP, which will focus on the reach of AI and strategies for sustainable, safe harbors. It will take place in Bridgetown, Barbados, in June of 2026. During those dates, we will also see the Inter-American Fora on practices for the same topic. Lastly, the resolution of Montevideo 2025 was approved, where we agreed on the decision of the CECIP to increase the obligatory contributions from $6,000 to $8,000, the clarification of the regulations of the SEEP, and the dates and topics of the following meeting and the forum on practices of the same. End of my report. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you to Uruguay for this update and for your commitment to advancing policy dialogue and technical cooperation through the Inter-American Committee on Ports. The 26th Inter-American Congress of Ministers of Tourism is scheduled to be held in Washington, D.C. on April 3rd and 4th, 2025. In preparation for the meeting, the Secretariat distributed 2 documents related to this process. First, the Secretariat distributed a revised version of the preliminary list of observers and special guests. I open the floor for comments from Member States regarding this document. If there are no objections, I propose that the Council approve the preliminary list of observers and special guests for the 26th Inter-American Congress of Ministers of Tourism. It is so approved. Approved. The second document for consideration is the draft schedule of the Congress. I now open the floor for comments from Member States regarding this document. If there are no objections, I propose that the Council approve the draft schedule for the 26th Inter-American Congress of Ministers of Tourism. It is so approved. The next item on our agenda is the draft SEDI annual report for 2024, document SEDI/doc 442/25. The draft report was distributed and presented at the last meeting of this Council on January 28th, and Member States were invited to comment as they deemed necessary, with a view to approving the document at this meeting. To date, the Secretariat received comments from 1 delegation in the form of a few adjustments, and that was from the delegation of Costa Rica. Costa Rica's suggestions have been incorporated into a revised version of the document which was circulated. I now open the floor to Member States who may wish to take the floor in reference to the draft SEDI annual report for 2024 presented by the Secretariat. I recognize the delegation of Costa Rica.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're thankful to the Secretariat because they accepted our observations. We are very happy to see the activities carried out by SEDI. We 100% support all of these initiatives that have to do with sustainable development and strengthening capacities in our region. The report is very complete in our view. It's constructive. Constructively and respectively, we'd like to raise 2 observations, not so much in the substance of the mandate as such, because that's a legal mandate, but more the priorities and how closely we're following those priorities and the mandate of SEDI. And in that vein, I would like to formulate a few ideas and share them with the other member states. These 2 observations that we would like to take into consideration, and we'd like them to be reflected in the report that was shared as in the revised version. First, we'd like to refer to the project on artificial development. In area, Costa Rica is committed to the effective governance frameworks for the digital transformation in the region. However, we observe that in the project or in the draft, there's a new project that would compile model governance frameworks for artificial intelligence in the Americas. And the interpretation of that mandate would lead us to suggest that we need to be a little closer to the mandate so that there are no misinterpretations. We're not creating a new law, a new regulatory framework for the Americas. And so instead of that title, we'd like to recommend that it be indicated that we're working more on a repository or a compilation of model governance frameworks for artificial intelligence, because we think that that would better reflect what we're doing here. It's a gathering together of best practices and models, and not a model itself, which we see in other activities. And we also think that it's very important that any movement forward in that area be done in coordination with the member states within the Plan of Action framework, and that it follow the Declaration on AI. We urge member states to continue to share experience, best practices, lessons learned, with an eye to remodeling our policies and creating frameworks that reflect the realities of our countries in the region. The second point we wanted to make had to do with the Hemispheric Center for Climate Funding. That is something we've talked about directly with the Secretariat, with Ms. Mark Lampides, who's here with us today. And beyond the current financial situation of the organization, we are also charged with guaranteeing that every initiative be based on sustainable, mutually agreed upon use of our resources according to the mandate that each secretariat has under the charter of the OAS, so that we aren't duplicating efforts with other organizations and their funds. And so here, Costa Rica recognizes the importance of taking advantage of the mechanisms available to us to face climate change in the region, given the need for increasing resilience and adaptation in the face of climate change. However, it's also aware that in these preparation efforts, development of capacities, accreditation, and other projects carried out with other climate funds, this is a very complex landscape, and we need serious coordination here on a regional level. And in that context, we observe that organizations like the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environment Fund, or GEF, are advancing towards creating regional offices that will be specialized in this area. And for that reason, Costa Rica insists that it's important to coordinate and create synergies with those other entities that are already existing and underway, so that we can better align our climate funding and operations, including those efforts that I just mentioned, for example, the GEF and the Green Climate Fund, and to avoid loss. Our goal here is to maximize the resources and the benefits available to the region and avoid duplication of efforts, and also optimize the use of those resources that are increasingly scarce, and we need to use them wisely and intelligently. Madam Chair, Costa Rica reaffirms its commitment to integral development and cooperation within the framework of the OAS. We believe firmly in the importance of prioritizing those initiatives that will create a real sustained impact in our countries, and guaranteeing at the same time that the organization's resources are used in a responsible and strategic manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Costa Rica. As we received no objections, I propose that the Council approve the SEDI annual report for 2024, incorporating the adjustments and comments and recommendations by the delegation of Costa Rica. Approved. And of course, we thank Costa Rica for those constructive comments of which the CD has taken note and on which action will be taken. It is so decided, therefore. The next item on our agenda is the draft CD work plan for 2025. Document CD/Doc 441/25. As you may recall, the draft work plan was also distributed and presented at the last meeting of this Council on January 28th, with a view to receiving feedback before its finalization and approval. During this period, the Secretariat received comments from the delegation of the United States. I now open the floor to member states who may wish to comment on the draft CD work plan for 2025 presented by the Secretariat. I recognize the delegation of Argentina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Briefly, to notify you that to date we've sent a footnote for the program that reflects the national position of Argentina that was reflected there during the last General Assembly, and also to signal to the Secretariat that we would like to have you take it into account as you implement the plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Argentina. Your footnote has been duly taken into account. Costa Rica, I recognize you as requesting the floor. The floor is yours, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to repeat what I just said when it comes to the report, but I do want to signal here that the same principles would apply to the work plan for the Secretariat in our view, especially when it comes to avoiding duplication of efforts with regard to other financial or international financial organizations when it comes to how to get know how to use and apply the green funds, the Green Climate Fund, as I mentioned, and the GEF. We're seeing their hubs already implemented at a sub-regional level. I think we'd just like to do a more broad reiteration of the ideas that I already mentioned. I'm not going to reread again, but we just want to look at everything with a clear eye, keeping in mind the specific resources we have available to us, and we really value the work that SETI does, but when it comes to the current financial situation of the organization, we really want to re-examine with an eye to austerity everything that's been laid out.
Thank you very much, Costa Rica. Your comments have been duly noted. I now offer the floor to Chile.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to take the opportunity to respectfully question or make a question to the delegate from the United States, particularly when it comes to the addition for the #1 strategic initiative, when it comes to the comprehensive strategic plan as it relates to the program on support for small and medium-sized businesses in the Caribbean and the expectations you have. Would you mind rephrasing or clarifying the focus on women and the changes that have been made and the rationale behind it, and how imperative this is for you to make as a change, given our current mandates and priorities? We understand the other contributions and requested changes, but we have a question as to that one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chile. The United States, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. The United States doesn't have additional guidance to respond to our distinguished delegate from Chile other than the submitted edit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, United States. I see no further requests for the floor. If there are no objections, I propose that the Council approve the SEDI work plan for 2025, incorporating the input from member states. Approved. The Secretariat takes note. There are no objections, it is so decided. Oh, I see Chile.
Sí, señora Presidenta,
Chile.
perdón que no.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair, I wasn't able to react in time when in response to the United States. I'd just like to give due time, because for these programs, we understand that they have an existing mechanism, and we achieved certain agreement as for these points of focus. So the particular focus on women and young people, particularly those programs that are associated, we think that that should be defended, and they are supported by all pillars of the organization. And in today's session this morning, when we talked about rural communities, one of the representatives of the Suriname project talked about the importance of incorporating perspectives from women, and particularly when it came to small and medium-sized businesses. That would be something, the only point that we really want to make. We'd like to have it maintained in the language provided by the Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chile. The chair will revert to the Executive Secretariat for guidance on that matter and for further discussion. Thank you very much. And of course, the matter will be brought back to this council. And in the interim, we would ask the United States if they could also revert to their principles for a justification for the recommended strike, which we've seen on the draft work plan. Thank you. We now move to item 6, other matters and closing remarks. We have come to the end of the items for consideration in today's order of business. Before concluding this meeting, I would like to take this opportunity to provide an update. As you are aware, the CD Omnibus Resolution to the General Assembly and other development-related resolutions will be negotiated within the Committee on Partnerships for Development Policies before submission to the CD for consideration and subsequent transmission to the next OAS General Assembly. To enable the process of negotiation as requested by delegations, the Secretariat established a virtual forum on the CorpoRanet platform to allow member states to share their texts, comments, and input for the Omnibus Resolution. We encourage all member states to actively participate in this process, as it provides an opportunity to foster consensus and ensure that the final resolution reflects member states' priorities for development in the region. On another point, on behalf of the Council, I express our sincere prayers and wishes to the permanent representative of the Holy See for the full recovery and recuperation of Pope Francis. He remains in our prayers. I now open the floor to any delegations wishing to raise additional matters. And in this regard, I recognize Ecuador. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I would just like to note that as part of the framework of the Inter-American Commission on Culture, we are putting on an exhibit in the Marcos Harley Hall, and we have over 75 pieces. We would like to thank the states that have contributed works for the exhibit. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ecuador. If there are no further matters to discuss, I thank you for joining the dialogue today and look forward to seeing you at the next CD meeting. The meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.